Hey kids, Uncle Clockwork here. A few of you have been looking over my library and noticing a few things and saying, do you read anything that's not so serious, Uncle Clockwork? Well, actually I do. Uncle Clockwork's been collecting comics for 40 years or so. Now he started off collecting things that basically every other kid did. Batman, Superman, Captain Carrot and the Zoo Crew, that kind of thing. Really, the comic that got me started off on everything was this comic right here. Marvel What If, issue number 34. It doesn't have any kind of plot line whatsoever. It's just a mishmash of various panels of alternate ideas and universes that the creators of Marvel Comics at the time came up with. It's really kind of just an amusing little parody comic. But as a young kid, and I can't remember exactly when I got a hold of this, I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. It just, struck my sense of humor. So I always, kept a hold of it, and it's been with me ever since. But that's not the only thing I collected back in the day. I was really into the whole Marvel Mutants thing. New Mutants, X-Men, X-Factor, X whatever. The storylines appealed to me mainly because of the younger characters. Kitty Pryde and then the whole New Mutants, they were all teenagers, I was a teenager. So the storyline sort of resonated with me. I had a little bit more to identify with. But as I grew older, naturally, my taste matured. So I ended up collecting Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But probably not the ones that everyone remembers. This is way before the cartoon, way before the movie. This is when they first came out. They were black and white, they were serious. They straight up killed people. So, if that was necessary. But it was kind of a dark, edgy, more adult comic than I was used to at the time. But then they turned it into a kids show, and a kids movie, and a kids product, and I sort of lost interest. But then a few other comics started coming along that, piqued my interest. In 1992, Image Comics was formed. Spawn came out, and I was a huge Todd McFarlane fan. So I collected this and a few other titles. And eventually, I started collecting more and more adult titles because I just got finished with this whole superhero thing. Well, after giving up the superheroes, I backtracked and started reading the horror comics. And believe me, there's a lot of those. House of Mystery, House of Secrets. I started reading, Phantom Stranger and Swamp Thing, things like that. And that's where I had developed a more deeper appreciation for the horror comics in the industry. But there's plenty of other material out there. So I got turned on to this character, Martial Law, probably in the late 80s. He's got a very limited run. He shows up every now and again. He's often confused with Judge Dredd. But that's not the case. The storyline is a completely different storyline. Basically, it's set in San Francisco in a world where almost everybody has superpowers. And he is a policeman that basically polices beings with superpowers. It's very dark, it's very edgy, it's very adult, and it's certainly not for kids. And I encourage you to give it a look. Dark, edgy, not for kids? Yeah. That sums up Alan Moore, right there. Now, out of all of Alan Moore's work, granted, Watchmen being his most successful, and V for Vendetta probably gaining, a great deal of popularity in the last few years, I still like to point out League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Not that horrible, horrible movie that made Sean Connery quit his career, because believe me, if I had made that movie, I would have quit too. The book series. Honestly, this storytelling right here, being the steampunk that I am, this nailed it for me. I love this, and I can't recommend it enough. Now in the 80s, Bill Willingham and Michael Wolff came out with this comic series, Elementals. This is also a kind of an edgy read. It's not your standard superhero comic, which is why I lump it in with this group. These characters all had to die to get their powers, and they're all based off the standard elementals, air, earth, fire, and water. But this has more of a supernatural, paranormal read to it. Kind of dark. I would almost lump it in with some of the horror comics of the day. But it's also one that I highly recommend if you haven't read it. Now, if I'm going to mention horror comics, I have to mention Mr. Monster. Now, Mr. Monster, he's also a little obscure character. He doesn't show up that much. But if you have a chance to pick up one of his comics, you should. Uh, the reason being is that he's not too serious. He doesn't pretend to be serious. He knows exactly who he is. He's a comic book character. I don't mean like he breaks the fourth wall like Deadpool. I mean, you can expect no preachiness from the comic. They're not going to try and tackle any major social issues. They're not going to get political on you. It's a straight up entertaining read. It always has been. So if you're just looking for fun and a good, creature feature story in the old, Universal movie monsters madness style, I highly recommend Mr. Monster. Phantom Stranger by Alicia Whitney and Guy Davis. This was one of the earlier Vertigo issues. This is Phantom Stranger #1 that was released in the 90s. If you get a chance to get a hold of this one, find it online, download it, whatever, I recommend this read too. This is an excellent story. They were trying to give a rebirth to the Phantom Stranger at the time, and they did a very good job. It didn't really take, but honestly, the story itself is pretty good, so I highly recommend this one if you can get a hold of it. Now, the same thing can be said for Mike Baron and Kelly Jones's Dead Man Exorcism. This also was an early 90s two-shot comic. Again, a very gripping story, trying to give rebirth to the dead man. Didn't quite work, but honestly, they built something great in this. The artwork actually works very well. Kelly Jones's art style, lends to Dead Man very well. So if you can pick this up or find it, download it, stream it, whatever, I highly recommend it. So, James Robinson, Teddy Christensen, and a few others came out with this one in the early 90s. This was when Vertigo was first formed. They released a few little 1, 2-shot, 3-shot deals like the Dead Man Exorcism and the Phantom Stranger. This one, 3-issue comic, Witchcraft. One of the best series I have ever read. I highly recommend this. The story is about two souls that are sort of locked in a reincarnation struggle, if you will. One soul is wronged in one lifetime and is granted the opportunity to get revenge within several other lifetimes. It's, like I said, a very interesting read, very dark. It incorporates a lot of history and a lot of magic, if you will. Witchcraft. Why not? If you can find this one, check it out. And if we were going to speak of history and magic, I can't speak highly enough of Neil Gaiman's Sandman series. This is perhaps my favorite comic series of all time. I believe I still have all the issues. They will eventually be releasing this in film format. I hear Netflix is making a movie version or a series out of it. But I encourage you to pick this up and read it before that happens. Really. Neil Gaiman, this is one of his most outstanding works. And I can't recommend this enough. Now, my second favorite comic book series of all time would have to be Matt Wagner's Mage. He wrote this in 3 installments. Back in the 80s, it was The Hero Discovered. In the 90s, it was The Hero Defined. And most recently, he's put out The Hero Denied. It follows the story of one Kevin Matchstick, who is the most recent incarnation of Arthur Pendragon. He's woven a very interesting and brilliant tale that revisits the Arthurian myths, along with a few other myths from various cultures in the world. Really, like I said, my second favorite of all time, Mage. If you can check it out, please do. Right now, I think the rights are owned by Image, so they put out a few more graphic novels. So they should be on the shelves now. Check it out. Now, this one is certainly not for kids. Howard Chaykin's Black Kiss. Now, apart from horror, the other genre that I really enjoy is noir. Good detective noir. Rainy skies and smoky rooms, the one broad coming into the detective's office, all distressed and leaving in a huff. Gives him a job that's, dangerous, but he needs the money. That kind of thing, A good seedy detective story is always, something I enjoy. And this is a good seedy detective story about a down and out jazz musician who sort of wraps up in some LA supernatural mischief. Really, there's a little bit of a supernatural bent to this one. I'm not going to ruin it for you. I'm just going to highly recommend it to you. So, but again, this one's not for kids. Now, finally, on this installment of Your Uncle's Comics, I'm going to recommend this massive tome. Alan Moore, Melinda Gebbie's Lost Girls. Again, this one is not for kids. This isn't even for a lot of adults, trust me. This is a very erotic tale that involves the fictional characters of Wendy from Peter Pan, Alice from Alice in Wonderland, and Dorothy from Wizard of Oz, all meeting together in a chateau prior to World War I. It's a very interesting and bizarre tale as they sort of recount to each other their own experiences. Once again, not for kids, not for some adults, but worth a read as it is by the master Alan Moore. And it'll keep you busy for a while. So, that's it for now, kids. Uncle Clockwork, clocking out. See you next time.